Hey everyone, let me introduce you to our new practice, which is the weekly practice of Sabbathing. From the very beginning, God has woven a rhythm of life into the very fabric of His creation. In Genesis 1, we see this refrain pop up time and time again, that there was evening and then there was morning throughout every single day. We need to reclaim the Genesis 1 understanding of time, that time begins with rest. We don't work so that then we are able to rest. We are actually invited to work from a place of rest. We are primarily human beings, not human doings. Everything about our lives should begin with rest as we learn to abide in our identity in Jesus. Our days so often begin very differently from the Genesis 1 account. As we roll over and bleary-eyed pick up our phones and check our notifications and check our emails, our days begin with noise, with task, with the flurry of responsibility. We power through our work. And so often our lives are so stretched. Before coronavirus, when was the last time that somebody asked you how you were doing and you didn't respond with the word busy? Our lives are so often unsustainable. We're always pushing the limits and we're always teetering on the edge of exhaustion. But here's the thing, we don't need to live like this. At the end of the creation narrative, at the start of Genesis chapter 2, we see God resting from all of His work on the seventh day and establishing a day that is both blessed and holy. God rested on the Sabbath. And we need to learn to rest on the Sabbath too. Sabbath comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat, which means to stop. And through our practice of Sabbath, we're invited to stop work for a day and to enter into the holiness of rest and the blessedness of unproductivity. Sabbath is a day for us to recover our identity in Jesus once again, for us to receive the gift of Sabbath, this invitation to repetitive and regular rest, which draws us into communion with Jesus. Through this weekly practice, we are formed to trust in God once again. Sabbath is all about surrender, where we surrender to the fact that Jesus is in charge and we are not, and that we are able to rest as He leads and as He works. One of the really interesting things about lockdown is that every day feels the same, doesn't it, as days roll into each other. And many of us have kind of clocked this and have decided to do certain things on certain days that make days feel different, particular, and standing out from the other days. Sabbath holds exactly the same principle. Sabbath isn't a day of do-nots. It's actually a day to do something, to choose to follow Jesus into the ways of His rest. Sabbath is a day for you to slow down, for you to choose to recover your life and to enjoy the presence of Jesus and each other. It's a day where we are invited to do three things: rest, worship, and delight, learning to do the things that bring us joy. And this week, as you think about Sabbath as it comes round later on in the week, we want to invite you to practice these three things on your Sabbath. Practice rest, practice worship, and practice delight. And to help you do that, I want to invite you to do three things this week. Firstly, take 10 minutes and grab a coffee and grab a quiet space and read through this week's practice guide, which will walk you through the truth that Sabbath isn't just a nice idea or a helpful piece of advice. Actually, it's a command for us to live a rich and deep life. You'll be able to see how practicing this way allows us to experience a foretaste of heaven in the present moment. It invites us to resist the tyranny of the urgent and a life that's just dominated by tech. You begin to see that Sabbath is scheduled social justice, and it actually allows us to live a sustainable and fruitful life in the way of the kingdom as we learn to slow down and to enjoy a loving union with Jesus and with each other. So take time to read the practice guide this week. And the second thing that we want to invite us all to do is to plan out our Sabbath. And whether this is by yourself or with your family, take some time to engage in a really fun exercise. If you're doing it with your family, bring them all in on this conversation. All you need to do is grab a piece of paper and write the 3 headlines of Sabbath on that sheet of paper: rest, worship, and delight. And begin to write down all of the things that you can do in your Sabbath that will lead you into these 3 things. How could you practice rest, the recovery of your bodies? What are the things that lead you into worshipping Jesus and focusing your attention on him? And what are the things that just bring you delight, that replenish your souls as you practice joy? Make sure that all of those things that are on your list, they kind of fall into these 3 categories: that they are accessible, particularly in lockdown, that they're nearby and that they're close to your home, that they are affordable. Sabbath is not about accumulating more stuff, it's actually about living within our means and learning to be really content with what we have. And also make sure that everything on your list is attainable, that it actually is possible and realistic in your season of life. Also, maybe jot down what are some of the things that you need to limit or restrict from your Sabbath that allow you to really experience rest and not just a cheap counterfeit version of them. So make sure that scrolling endlessly on your phone or binging on Netflix is not in your Sabbath categories. But also begin to think, what rituals could you weave into your Sabbath rhythm and how your children could get involved in this. Some of you have built in these new rhythms during lockdown, things that you're able to do as a family or by yourself that lead you already into this way of life. So could some of these activities that you've established in lockdown find a home in your Sabbath rhythm? And then the third thing we want to encourage you to do is have a go. Practice Sabbath. Enjoy the freedom to put into practice everything that is on your list. For most of us, Sabbath is going to fall on a Sunday, because usually that's the day whenever work slows down, whenever there's time for family and friends, and when there's already a rhythm of corporate worship that's already in place. But if you work on Sundays, if you're working shifts, or even if you're on the front line right now, you might want to take some time to proactively consider when you could build in a Sabbath rhythm over the course of the next number of days, weeks, and months. You might also want to consider starting your Sabbath on the night before the day, particularly on a Saturday evening. In the Hebrew tradition, Sabbath started at sundown, and you could start your Sabbath on a late Saturday afternoon, early Saturday evening. And whatever you do, build in a threshold moment, a moment which separates normal time from Sabbath time. This could be sharing a simple meal, praying a particular prayer, or lighting a candle. And particularly if you do have kids, this is a really helpful thing to consider. Starting your Sabbath the evening before. This means that you're not waking up on a Sunday morning thinking, flip, I need to start practicing Sabbath whenever the kids are running around and there's lots to do. By starting it the evening before, you're able to easily lead yourself into the rhythm of Sabbath. This week, have a conversation with those around you, with your friends and with your family. Chat this thing through. Pray with Jesus around what it looks like for you to practice Sabbath. If it helps, schedule the first week of it out just to help you get into that frame of mind. You might notice that the first couple of weeks are really tricky to build this in as you not work and as you stop endlessly scrolling through your phones. But as you make this a weekly habit, as you build it as a ritual, it will shape you and it will lead you in the ways of rest, in worship and delight in Jesus more than anything else. In the past 2 or 3 years, Emma and I have established a rhythm of Sabbath into our weekly practices. We really need it. Emma and I work really hard throughout the week. Life is full, but each week we're kind of on this sacred pilgrimage as we look ahead to our Sabbath every single week. We start our Sabbath on a Friday evening with a meal either by ourselves or with some friends, and we keep going through to Saturday because Sunday is a work day for me. And we've learned to savour Sabbath, to rest in it, to worship and to delight by cooking really good meals, by sleeping in, by reading, by walking, by partying with friends, spending time with family, creating more space for long, lingering conversations. sitting still and quietly, praying, reading the Psalms, and of course, brunch. Brunch is the best part of our Sabbath. Saturday mornings are sacred in the Bothwell household. God rested, and so should you. He Sabbathed, and you should also. Ruth Barton describes Sabbath as a way of arranging our life to honour the rhythm of things, work and rest, fruitfulness and dormancy, giving and receiving, being and doing, activism and surrender. The day itself is set apart, devoted completely to rest, to worship, and to delight in God. This week, do 3 things. Take time to read through the practice guide, have fun planning your Sabbath, and then have a go at it. Let's all take the learning that we've experienced through lockdown and let's weave it into our Sabbath rhythm. Let's make this day different, a day that's set apart, a day that is both blessed and holy. And as we do, let's never go back to the way things were PC, pre-coronavirus. Whenever we were so busy, busyness is the enemy of spirituality. And in slowing down, in resting, in being fully present, we get to commune with Jesus. We get to abide in him, allow the fruit of his Spirit to form in our lives and the fruitfulness of his kingdom to take hold of the communities around us. This week, as you Sabbath, may you rest, may you worship, and may you delight in Jesus. May you encounter him in his practice of Sabbath. Grace and peace to you all.